Hi, welcome to Come Study with me, Elder Brock. Today, we will be looking at Job chapters 38 through 42. Job has asked hard questions from the ashes of his suffering. His friends have spoken many words, but now the Lord answers Job out of the whirlwind. The answer does not begin with an explanation of every pain. It begins with revelation of God's majesty. The Lord asks Job where he was when the foundations of the earth were laid, when the morning stars sang together, and when the sons of God shouted for joy. Creation becomes a sacred classroom. The sea has boundaries. The morning has a place. Light, darkness, snow, rain, stars, clouds, lions, and ravens all stand under the care of God. Job is not being mocked. He is being lifted out of a small courtroom into the vast temple of creation. The Lord is teaching that divine wisdom is larger than human sight. We may not understand every chapter of suffering while we are inside it, but God governs more than we can measure. The same Creator who knows the path of the lightning also hears the cry of the weak. Chapter 38 lands with humility. Mortal life is limited, but God's power, wisdom, and care are not limited. In the presence of the Creator, Job is invited to trust before he can fully explain. The chapter also protects the soul from a dangerous conclusion, that silence from heaven means absence from heaven. The Lord had not been absent from creation, and he had not been absent from Job. His questions become mercy, because they place Job's pain inside a universe governed by holy intelligence. In Job chapter 39, the Lord continues his questions, but now the attention moves from the heavens and the sea to living creatures. The wild goats bring forth their young beyond human supervision. The wild donkey runs free in the wilderness. The unicorn or wild ox cannot be harnessed by human command. The ostrich, the horse, the hawk, and the eagle each reveal a world of strength, instinct, motion, and design. The Lord is showing Job that life is not controlled by human hands. There is order in places Job cannot visit, birth in places Job cannot guard, and power in creatures Job cannot tame. The war horse moves with courage. The eagle rises on the heights and sees from far away. These images are not random nature lessons. They testify that the Lord's care reaches beyond the borders of human management. Job's pain had made the world feel narrow, as suffering often does. But God widens the frame. The Lord's governance includes creatures that live outside the fence of human usefulness. That means Job is not forgotten simply because he cannot see the pattern. For disciples of Jesus Christ, this chapter teaches reverent trust. God's wisdom is not only displayed in what he explains to us. It is displayed in what he sustains without our help. Chapter 39 closes with a quiet invitation. Let us soften accusation, and let the order of creation teach the soul to wait upon the Lord. The lesson is gentle but firm. God's world is alive with purposes we do not supervise. When we cannot trace the reason for our own suffering, we can still recognize the hand of the Lord in the order he preserves around us. Creation becomes a witness that care continues even beyond our sight. Job chapter 40 brings the Lord's questioning to a direct spiritual point. After the sweep of creation, the Lord asks whether the one who contends with the Almighty will instruct him. Job answers with humility. He lays his hand upon his mouth. He has spoken, and now he chooses silence before God. But the Lord continues. He asks Job whether he can disannul divine judgment or condemn God in order to make himself righteous. This is one of the deepest turns in the book. Job's suffering is real, and the Lord does not deny it. But Job must not let pain become a throne from which he judges God. The Lord then speaks of power, majesty, wrath, and the bringing low of the proud. Human beings cannot save themselves by their own right hand. Then the Lord points to Behemoth, a creature of immense strength. Its bones are like bars of iron. It rests among the reeds. The river does not frighten it. The image teaches scale. Job is strong in integrity, but he is not sovereign over creation. The chapter does not crush Job. It restores his place before God. True faith does not require us to pretend suffering is easy. It asks us to remember that God is God, and we are not. Chapter 40 lands in reverence. Humility is not defeat. It is the beginning of wisdom, because the humbled soul can finally receive what pride cannot hold. This is why the chapter is so merciful. The Lord does not ask Job to deny his tears. He asks him to stop using his tears as the final measure of truth. In that sacred correction, Job is prepared to receive restoration without demanding to be God's judge. In Job chapter 41, the Lord describes Leviathan, a creature of terrifying power. No ordinary weapon can master it. Its scales are shut together. Its strength makes the mighty afraid. The Lord's question is simple and searching. If Job cannot subdue such a creature, how can any mortal stand before the Maker of all things, as though God were accountable to human command? Leviathan becomes a symbol of power beyond human control. Job has faced losses he could not manage, words he could not answer, and grief he could not repair. The Lord does not pretend those things are small. Instead, He reveals that there are powers in creation and in life that exceed human strength. But none of them exceed God. This is where faith begins to breathe again. We do not worship a God who is surprised by the deep. We worship the Lord who sets boundaries, who knows every creature, and who rules over what terrifies us. The chapter also warns against spiritual pride. Human tools cannot pierce every mystery. Human arguments cannot conquer every darkness. But the Lord remains holy, wise, and sovereign. Chapter 41 lands with awe. When life feels like Leviathan, untamable and frightening, the answer is not to pretend we are stronger than we are. The answer is to remember that God is stronger than all we fear. The Lord is teaching Job to measure fear differently. The terrifying thing may be greater than Job, but it is still a creature, not the Creator. Faith grows when the soul can name its weakness honestly and still confess that the Lord reigns above every deep and every danger. Job chapter 42 is the sacred landing of the whole book. Job answers the Lord with confession, humility, and renewed trust. He acknowledges that God can do everything and that no purpose of the Lord can be withheld. He admits that he had spoken of things too wonderful for him, things he did not fully understand. Then comes one of the most tender movements in Scripture. Job says that he had heard of God, but now his eye sees him. Suffering has not given Job every explanation, but it has brought him into a deeper encounter with the Lord. Job repents in dust and ashes. The Lord then turns to Job's friends, who had not spoken rightly of him. They must offer sacrifice, and Job will pray for them. The wounded servant becomes an intercessor. After Job prays for his friends, the Lord turns his captivity and blesses his latter end more than his beginning. This restoration is not a cheap ending. It does not erase grief as though pain never happened. It witnesses that the Lord is merciful, just, and able to redeem. For followers of Jesus Christ, Job's final chapter points toward the Redeemer who intercedes, restores, and brings life beyond loss. Chapter 42 closes with worship. We may not understand every storm, but we can come to know the Lord in the storm and trust His purposes when our own understanding is small. The final grace is not only that Job receives again. It is that Job knows God more truly, prays for others more mercifully, and stands before the Lord with a changed heart. The book ends by teaching that redemption is deeper than replacement, and that God's purposes remain wholly even after long sorrow.